Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're uncovering the fascinating science and, honestly, the mystery behind a universally common but totally overlooked feature of commercial air travel. You know when you're staring out at the clouds mid-flight and you happen to notice that tiny, perfectly round hole near the bottom of your window? Well, today, we're going to explore exactly why it's there and how this brilliant little piece of engineering actually keeps you safe up in the skies.
Okay, let's dive right in. Have you ever actually spotted this thing? Next time you snag a window seat, take a really close look at the bottom of the glass. There's this tiny, pin-sized hole just staring back at you. Honestly, it kind of looks like a manufacturing defect, or maybe a chip in the glass. But no, it's entirely intentional. In fact, it plays an absolutely critical role in keeping millions of passengers safe every single day.
It's wild to think that millions of us lean our heads against these windows every year and never even notice it's there. But this tiny hole, it's an absolute masterpiece of modern aviation engineering. It's one of those hidden secrets that silently performs just a monumental task. To really appreciate it, we have to look past the surface and understand that an airplane window is way more complicated than the windows in your house or your car. All right, let's break this whole thing down. The windows on commercial jets are not just a single piece of glass. Actually, scratch that, they aren't even glass. They're a highly advanced, complex, three-layer acrylic defense system. First, you've got the inner pane, sometimes called the scratch pane. That's the flimsy plastic cover you can actually touch from your seat, and it's really just there to protect the rest of the window from us passengers. Next, you have the middle pane right behind it. And finally, the outer pane, which is the thickest, strongest layer separating you from the extreme elements outside. So, where does our mystery feature fit into all this? Officially, it's called a bleed hole, or sometimes a breather hole. It's a small, precisely engineered opening drilled exclusively into that middle pane we just talked about. Think of it as an airflow valve. It's designed to equalize pressure and manage moisture between the different layers of this whole multi-pane setup. But you might be wondering, why do we even need to equalize pressure in the first place? Well, to understand that, we gotta look at the incredibly hostile environment outside the aircraft at cruising altitude. Out there, you're dealing with freezing temperatures and extremely low atmospheric pressure where there just isn't enough oxygen to breathe. So to keep you alive and comfortable, the aircraft relies on cabin pressure, creating a safe, highly pressurized, breathable environment inside. But this sets up an enormous, continuous battle of physics. You've got high pressure trying to push out from the inside and low pressure outside. And that battle really peaks at roughly 35,000 feet, the standard cruising altitude for most commercial jetliners. Up there, the invisible physical forces and extreme pressure differences the aircraft has to withstand are just staggering. The airplane fuselage is essentially acting like a giant pressurized metal balloon. Because the air inside desperately wants to escape into the thinner air outside, an immense amount of physical stress is pushed against the walls of the airplane, and most notably, right against those windows. Here is where the bleed hole's genius ability to manage all that force comes into play. Because the hole is in that middle pane, air from the cabin just flows freely right through it, filling the small gap between the middle and outer panes. What this means is that the pressure perfectly balances out between the inner and middle panes, effectively bypassing the middle pane altogether. By letting the pressure pass through, the system directs all of that massive cabin pressure stress entirely onto the strong, super thick outer pane. That leaves the middle pane perfectly intact as a reliable, fail-safe backup. But hey, aviation engineering is all about multitasking, right? This tiny breather hole actually serves two completely different but equally vital functions. The first, like we said, is pressure equalization, which directly protects the overall structural integrity of the window. The second function is acting as a moisture escape route, and this one is just as important for your passenger experience because it directly prevents the window from fogging up and frosting over during your flight. Let's talk about that escaping moisture for a second. Without this tiny breather hole, think about the drastic temperature difference between the cozy 70-degree cabin and the minus 60-degree air outside. It would cause instant, severe condensation. The natural humidity from passengers breathing and sweating inside the cabin would get trapped in the air gap between the window panes. It would freeze almost instantly, completely fogging up your view and leaving you staring at a wall of white frost for the entire flight. The bleed hole literally breathes that moisture out, keeping your view crystal clear.
So what exactly would happen in a world without the bleed hole? Imagine an aircraft where this tiny hole was accidentally blocked, or engineers just completely removed it from the design. What happens to the structural integrity of the plane and just the overall experience of the passengers when those immense pressure and temperature differences have absolutely no way to equalize?
Well, the short answer, A complete domino effect of terrible consequences. First off, you'd have dangerous, unnecessary mechanical stress placed directly onto the middle pane, forcing a thinner piece of acrylic to bear loads it simply was not designed for. Second, as we just discussed, you'd have severely reduced passenger visibility from the constant internal fogging. And lastly, airlines would face greatly increased maintenance costs and constant groundings for inspections, because trapped moisture could lead to mold, corrosion, or degradation of the window seals over time. Because the stakes are incredibly high, and these atmospheric forces are so severe. Aircraft windows and their clever breather holes don't just go straight onto a plane. Oh no, they are rigorously tested under extreme pressure in massive simulation chambers long before ever receiving flight certification. Engineers push these acrylic panes to their absolute breaking points, proving time and time again that the presence of the bleed hole flawlessly dictates exactly how and where those massive pressure loads are distributed. And you know, this brilliantly illustrates another amazing aviation fact. It's not just the hole that manages pressure, it's the entire shape of the window itself. Have you ever noticed how airplane windows always have rounded corners? Early commercial jets back in the 1950s actually used square windows. But engineers quickly discovered that square corners concentrate structural stress into 4 sharp points, which is highly dangerous and sadly led to tragic mid-air breakups. Rounded corners, much like our bleed hole, are designed specifically to distribute extreme pressure safely and evenly across the entire surface. It's just a huge testament to the incredible evolution of flight science. To wrap up our journey today, just remember that this tiny bleed hole does a tremendous amount of heavy lifting. It regulates pressure to ensure the outer pane takes the load, it acts as a fail-safe backup system, it prevents condensation to give you that beautiful view of the clouds, and it ultimately extends the lifespan of the aircraft itself. Truly, sometimes the smallest, most overlooked engineering details make the absolute biggest difference in the world. So next time you're flying at 35,000 feet, you can look down at that tiny breather hole and know exactly the massive battle of physics it's fighting to keep you safe. Which kind of makes you wonder, right? What other brilliant life-saving engineering marvels are hiding in plain sight on your next flight? If you enjoyed uncovering this mystery, please make sure to like, subscribe, and keep exploring the fascinating hidden world of aircraft engineering with us. There's so many more incredible aviation secrets waiting to be explained. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.